Coming up on this edition of Sunday Nation, the vote in Detroit on Tuesday's election. What is the vote going to look like? Is there going to be a low voter turnout? Well, that is the expectation for now, but we are going to find out from Daniel Baxter, the Chief Operating Officer for the Detroit Department of Elections. We also have Jacqueline Moffett, Executive Director for Homes for Black Children, whose agency earlier this week was going to have its license revoked, but for the intervention of the governor's office, there is a stay. Is there a stay because of the re-election? Is Governor Gretchen Whitmer going to shut down the agency, Homes for Black Children, which was born out of the ashes of the 1967 race rebellion? Will the agency be shut down after this election? We'll find out from Jacqueline Moffett. And later on, Pontiac Mayor Tim Grimel is also here to talk to us about economic development, racial justice, and more in the city of Pontiac, all coming up on this week's edition of Sunday Nation. All right, let's bring in Daniel Baxter, Chief Operating Officer for the Detroit Department of Elections, ahead of Tuesday's election here in Detroit. Thank you so much for being here.
Oh, thank you. It's a plum-pleasing pleasure to be present with you on this wonderful day.
All right, let's talk about the elections on Tuesday. Are we all set from the Department of Elections?
The City of Detroit Department of Elections is all set, ready to go. We've trained our poll workers. We've identified our polling locations. Every individual who has requested an absentee voter ballot has received that ballot. They have until 8 o'clock on election night to deliver it to the Department of Elections. We're ready.
You know, all eyes are going to be on Detroit. You know, this is not a presidential election. It's still a midterm election, but just given not the anxiety per se, but given the pressures that we see, the pressure that is coming up with the midterm election, there are folk who are going to be looking to see what they can find within the Department of Elections, if in fact, you know, things are moving in a smooth way. I'm just wondering, though, how long you think we're going to be at Cobo Hall on Tuesday night?
Oh, it'll be some time.
Okay.
We'll probably count upwards of 75 to 80,000 absentee ballots.
And I mean Huntington Place, right?
Yes, right. Huntington Place,
Well, I'm used to Cobo Hall, but yeah.
Right. Let's see what it'll be next year, right?
Right.
So we'll count anywhere between 75 to 80,000 absentee ballots. We've been afforded the opportunity to start pre-processing ballots beginning on Sunday, which will give us a leg up in terms of processing and tabulating. So probably at 8 o'clock, you'll get our preliminary returns for absentees. That'll be upwards of anywhere from probably about 65 to 70,000. And then you'll get the balance of those a little later on in the evening. The law states that we have until 8 o'clock to receive absentee ballots. So we have to go to all of our satellites, all of our...
On the day of the election.
On election day, that's correct.
Yeah.
We have to go to all of our satellites, go to our drop boxes, go to the post office, gather those ballots, process them accordingly, and then deliver them to Huntington Place, where we would then tabulate those ballots. So we'll probably be done between maybe 2 o'clock and 4 o'clock, and you'll have those results, but you'll have the lion's share of absentee returns between 9 o'clock and 10 o'clock.
So looking at just the last presidential election, anything significantly different this time around as far as you're concerned regarding preparation?
Oh, absolutely. After the presidential elections, we went back to the drawing board in terms of how we do the work for absentee voting. We recalibrated that operation. We transformed the department. That operation used to be in a corner on the first floor. Now it's on the fourth floor. It's contained all on the fourth floor. We do checks, double checks, and triple checks before those ballots are delivered to Huntington Place to be tabulated. And as a result, during the last municipal election in both the primary and the general, all of our counting boards, that was 120 boards. They all balanced, meaning that for every voter's name that was in the poll book, there was a ballot. The Wayne County Board of Canvassers gave us high praises. The State Bureau of Elections gave us high praises. And even in the August primary of this year, out of 450 precincts, absentee precincts that is, only 7 were out of balance. And then when you factored in all of the numbers, the results were off by 1 vote. That's unprecedented. We haven't had those type of numbers and results for absentee voting since 1998. And that was the year, of course, we threw out punch card balloting and entered into optical scan voting.
I want to talk about the precincts, though, because I think that's important here. In the past, you know, there have been reported issues with certain precincts, not all of the precincts, though. When you look at all of the precincts now set to serve Detroit voters on Tuesday, are they all set to go, or are we going to expect some unprecedented issues?
No, I don't think you're going to expect any unprecedented issues. The toughest time on election morning when it comes to the precincts is from 6 a.m. to 9 a.m. Those 3 hours is when we set up and open. That's when we get our calls for the issues. And typically by 9 o'clock, we have those issues resolved, whether or not it's a group can't get into the building, we have to call a building manager. But we don't anticipate any type of problems, nothing major or unprecedented. The good news is this: the culture of elections have changed since 2020. What I mean by that is now 60% of those individuals who vote on election day vote by absentee. The other 40% vote at the precinct. That wasn't the case prior to no reason absentee voting and prior to COVID-19. It used to be the exact opposite. So now what you're seeing is that there's a smaller crowd or population of people who are going to vote at the precincts on election day, which means that you don't have to deal with the dynamic of long lines, which is a benefit for a city as large as Detroit. So now with absentee voting taking the lion's share of all of the votes and the precincts coming in second place, it takes a lot of pressure off of the tension from opening and all of the issues that used to impact us at the precinct on election day. For instance, during the 2004 election, the majority of the challenges that occurred on election day were at the precincts. Now, they're at the Central Counting Board in Huntington Place, where the absentee ballots are tabulated. So the focus is no longer on the precinct voting, where it is on absentee voting. And then I think it's Prop 1 that deals with the voting matters for the state of Michigan. If that's adopted, you're going to see even a less amount of people that go to the poll on election day with early voting, absentee voting as options.
So, I want to talk about just the voter turnout in Detroit. That's going to be one of the big stories to come out of Detroit. It's not a presidential election, and I do recognize that, because then the voting then it's more, you know, it's larger than midterm, though. What are your numbers telling us right now in terms of voter turnout?
Well, it's a little concerning. In 2018, the same type of election, we had a 41% voter turnout, which was higher than it had been in years. This year, it may not be the case. We may not get up to 40%. Absentees will represent about 75,000 votes, which translates to 15% of the vote. Then the other 15% would have to come from the precinct, which would be another 75,000 individuals going to the precinct on election day. But if you take the statistics into play, where 60% of the votes cast are absentee and 40% are at the precinct, then you got another dynamic going on. We may not even get 50,000 people at the precinct on election day, and if that's the case, we'll be somewhere in the family of 30 to 35% voter turnout in the city of Detroit.
So in total, we may be under 100,000 votes?
In total, we'll probably be somewhere a little under 150,000.
150,000?
Yep.
That is concerning.
That's concerning. That's very concerning. It's very concerning. while we're a nonpartisan entity, you still look at those numbers. You look at the point spread for the top of the ticket, where the governor, the secretary of state, and the attorney general are on the ballot. That, for me, because there are less than 5 points between each of the opponents, that's concerning for me, because what you may see is a spike in challenger participation in the city of Detroit.
Explain that.
Meaning that, you know, when the point system gets close, opponents may feel as though they have a greater opportunity to win. If they could disqualify a vote or disenfranchise a vote. And that's where my concern is. With that, I would be a lot more comfortable if that point spread was above 5%. But nonetheless, we'll be focused at the department to make sure that we dot our I's and cross our T's.
Let's talk about potential voter challenges who show up. You know, we're seeing all around the country folk who plan to show up at some polling locations and so forth. What are you doing to ensure that Detroiters who are coming out to the polls are inoculated from any kind of potential so-called challengers who may, you know, try to thwart people from exercising their franchise?
Yeah, well, we have, before every election, we have a roundtable discussion with Corporation Counsel and the Detroit Police Department, as well as the Bureau of Elections and the Attorney General's office, to talk about any issues that may impact the city of Detroit. And certainly this election is a high-profile election. After 2020, we know that there'll be challenges. So we've had conversations to make sure that we've provided DPD with a list of all of our polling locations so that they can patrol to make sure that their presence is felt in the community. But to take it a little further, down at Huntington Place at the Central Counting Board just yesterday, we met with DPD, Huntington Place Security, as well as Corporation Counsel to talk about the strategy in terms of making sure that if any bad actors show up on election day, that we have a comprehensive procedure in place to make sure that those type of issues are eradicated immediately. The thing that really gives me a feeling of safety and security is the fact that our poll workers in 2020 did a stellar job when the attacks came. They stayed focused.
And we were dealing with COVID back then.
They were dealing with COVID back then, right. They were focused, dedicated. They didn't flinch, and they made sure that every last ballot counted. And in fact, all of those poll workers are coming back for this election. Many of them pulled me to the side after that election or during the election saying, Baxter, if I had known that my vote was this important, I would have been engaged a long time ago. These were people who had just worked for the first time. So we're confident.
You know, I asked the question because I remember in 2020, I was in the press room at Huntington Place, and I turned around and looked around. I saw a crowd of folk, not from the city, banging the doors, trying to enter into the location where you all were counting the votes.
Correct. So the good news for that is that we're no longer in that room. That was Hall E, I believe it is. Now we're in Hall A, which is closer to Congress and on the first level. So we'll be located there, and there's doors there. There are no windows. So you're either in or out. You can't see what's going on inside from the outside. So that's a benefit. And we have a very ironclad procedure in place to receive challengers, the media, as well as observers. So instead of just taking a piece of paper and filling it out, we have a digital application that you'll use in order to get in so that we can account for every person to make sure that we do not exceed the population of challengers that can be inside of the Central Counting Board on election day.
That is very concerning, and I think with this election, you know, we're hoping that there's not a repeat of that. You know, because we don't see other folk, other places where people are banging to enter into into where they're counting the votes. I mean, in other places, you wouldn't even get close.
That's right, absolutely. And we recognize that, and that's why that was one of the reasons why we went to Hall A this time.
All right. Well, thank you so much for being here.
Oh, you're welcome.
All right. Daniel Baxter is the Chief Operating Officer for the Detroit Department of Elections, giving us an update ahead of Tuesday's election, D-Day, Democracy Day. We'll be right back after this break with the Mayor of Pontiac. Tim Grimel is here to talk to us about what is happening in that urban enclave. Stay with us. I'm Bankole Thompson.